Tēnā koutou te whare. The land that is the subject of the settlement bill was confiscated in 1865. The iwi at the time were not in rebellion. They were rightly and justly living as an independent nation, as was their right. The confiscation, which caused enormous harm at the time, was compounded by the courts, who later gave land away to others, compounding the harms. And then later still, government inducements in the form of threats, either sell it to us or we'll take it, again compounded even more of the harms that had been caused. This land, like all the land in this country, has been subject to an incredible abusive process by various governments over many years. Some who, like today, will claim that good is being done when in fact harms are still being committed. We have to accept to some extent that our process here will never fully right what was wrong, will never fully return to those who are entitled what was wrongly taken from them. And it's a hard situation to be in for us making the decision. It's worse, of course, for those who are subject to it. Now, this bill is an attempt to restore some of that hurt and some of those resources back to the people who actually own them. But the damage is done. And we can see that damage and that hurt reflected in the Select Committee when people come to us with concerns that they have been raising either with government or with other iwi or through agencies or the courts, still decade after decade after decade. Iwi attempts to work through the Crown's process for restitution has itself exacerbated the harms of the past. It's expensive, it takes many years. It is often the same argument that iwi are running time after time with different ministers, with different governments, with different courts and with different judges, time after time, and never properly heard, never properly dealt with. So this settlement is part of a much larger and old series of systems and negotiations and, at the end of the day, concessions that are made by iwi Māori in an attempt to find some way to work effectively together. And it is an enormously generous act of iwi Māori that they still engage with us as a parliament. They still engage with government as an agency when they know and we know that the harm will not fully be restored. They know and we know that harm will be created in the process itself. So I want to pay enormous respect to those who have been working through these negotiations, particularly for this land in these circumstances. The minefield of a government-driven process is very, very hard work. We heard in Select Committee very significant concerns from iwi, from hapu, that, as I have said, clearly have a very long history premised in previous Crown-inflicted harm. And so I want to just acknowledge, we won't have time to go into all of the issues in detail because they were significant and there were a number of them, but I do want to just acknowledge Ngāti Manawa, Ngāti Haka Patuhuhu, Ngāti Moiwhare, Ngāti Whare Ruapani, Kahununu, all of those who came and reiterated yet again for our benefit, but to some harm for them, the concerns that they have with this process. But also I want to acknowledge Tuhoe for pursuing a settlement for Uruwera, for pursuing their best possible attempts for the independence of that land, for self-government, for taking on a national park and all of the history, the Pākehā history that is invested in that structure, and for finding a way to work through all of those issues with their own whānau, with Pākehā who have this deep commitment to the restoration and conservation of our land, and with a Crown-driven process that causes harm. It is an extraordinary act to have engaged with that, and Tuhoe deserve utmost respect, as all of those who engage with settlements deserve utmost respect for all of that hard work. So this settlement will fix some wrongs that have been committed in the past, and for that we should be very pleased, but it has created others, and it certainly won't fix all of those that have been created. So let's remember, as we go through this process for this bill, that we still owe it to those who have been excluded and who are still bereft of their rightful entitlements, to hold on to their concerns and to look for new ways to right them. This settlement process, the Greens have long called for a significant review. It was designed by government, it was designed by Pākehā, and although it has evolved a little over the last many years, it has never been a process determined by Māori. That is its fundamental flaw. And no government has seriously addressed that fundamental flaw. If it was driven by Māori, we would have a very different kind of process, and rightly so. It shouldn't be the perpetrator who decides how justice is meted out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Tau Henare.
Mr. Speaker,